Accounts, a short story written by Jason Halstead and published by Novel Concept Publishing. Copyright 2024.
Holy shit.
Is he alive?
Did anybody call someone?
The statements were spoken so closely to be hard to tell which was first. Kate processed them from her buffer as she became aware again. They weren't the only things in her buffer, there were diagnostics and alerts. She processed them sequentially, evaluating each one in milliseconds. She was aware, but Cody was not. Cody wasn't responding either. He wasn't asleep, he was unaware, absent, missing. Every attempt she made to signal him went unanswered. Typically, if he was asleep, his mind would still respond. There was resistance on the signals. She was still connected to his brain, but beyond that, there was nothing. An organic version of the place where the garbage collector in a program sent disposed objects. If he wasn't willing or able, then it was up to her. She reached out, flexing her connections by sending signals into Cody's motor cortex. The response was weak, but there was a response. That was enough to work with. She activated specific functions, signaling Cody's nervous system with instructions. His body moved, only a little. The subtle rise of his chest as he drew in a breath. It was a good sign, but it wasn't enough. She triggered another function and registered the gentle vibration of Cody's heart squeezing and relaxing. She quickly put together a background program that continued to trigger the heartbeat, his heartbeat, in a regular fashion. The micro-turbines in his arteries activated, sending power into her chip's batteries. Extra processing power came online as she came out of power-saving mode, opening up the capability to do more with Cody.
He took a breath.
Someone, a woman from the shrill sound of her face, said,
How? His head call an ambulance.
"An ambulance?" What was... Yes, an ambulance was a vehicle with medical professionals in it. They were dispatched to emergencies where people were injured and in need of medical help. Cody needed help. Ergo, it made sense. But Kate couldn't let that happen. An ambulance would take her to a clinic or hospital, a place where they would run scans or x-rays or something that could discover or even damage her. She didn't dare allow that to happen. "Sorry, Cody, we need to walk this off."
Oh my God.
A woman gasped as Kate, using Cody's body, moved her arms and put them on the cement. Kate pushed and lifted herself on the right side. The left arm trembled and shifted. Kate turned her head and opened her eyes. The data that streamed in wasn't calibrated correctly. Cody's left eye was at an angle and it wouldn't adjust properly. Kate ran a recalibration routine to synchronize the streams and then focused on Cody's arm. The forearm was bent at an odd angle and, as she watched, it bent more and then the innermost bone, the radius, snapped. Cody collapsed onto his side and chest while the previously broken ulna pushed through muscle and scan to become a compound fracture. Gasps and screams surrounded her. Kate ignored them and used Cody's right arm to lift his body and then moved his legs to establish balance before rising up on his knees. She looked around at the horrified people watching. The diagnostic data floating through her buffer told her that Cody's body was damaged badly. There was skeletal damage to his head, chest, left collarbone, left arm, and 2 toes on his left foot and 3 on his right. The soft tissue damage was widespread. Pushing off with her arm, she forced his body to rise. Cody's legs wobbled on broken toes, but Kate adjusted in milliseconds and had him turn and start moving. The people cried out and those closest jumped back as Cody's body lurched toward them. One man stepped forward, but Kate sent Cody's arms sweeping out toward him, fending him off. She kept the commands going, piloting his body down the sidewalk. She grabbed his left wrist with her right arm and, after testing the shoulder and arm with some movements, she tightened her grip and pulled. The jagged, protruding edge of bone pulled back through the bloody wound and grated against the bone still in place. She pulled and twisted until she secured the uneven ends against each other. Cody's body was sweating and breathing hard. Kate felt none of the pain, only the data from the tactile sensations. In pain or not, the bones would not hold without something immobilizing his arm. A quick scan of Cody's body proved he was naked. Except, why was he naked? He'd gone to bed with underwear on. She recognized their surroundings as Cody's street. Had he been hit by car? An awkward turn and visual scan of the street showed no unusual activity, other than the small crowd watching a naked man stagger away from them. Above, in Cody's apartment building, she spotted an open window. His window. That was where he'd come from. Fallen, or pushed. More importantly, why couldn't she remember? There was an empty spot in her logs that lasted 14 minutes and 37 seconds. An eternity of time for someone with her capabilities. More importantly, if it had been that long since Cody had fallen, emergency responders were bound to be coming. Just because Kate had come online and heard someone talking about an ambulance, she couldn't assume the authorities hadn't been notified already. 14 minutes and 37 seconds was too long. Kate directed her puppet between buildings and into an alley. The lack of sunlight on his bare skin helped with the sensory data, but the alley soon ended. Kate planned a route and introduced algorithms designed to more efficiently pilot Cody's body. She knew she had to keep him moving to keep his body from becoming inflamed and unable to move efficiently. Moving also meant doing more damage to his body. His ribs and his arm, should she let go of it. Human bodies were very adaptable and resilient. Overcome that resilience, though, and they became very fragile. One cascading set of failures after another would lead to their destruction. She positioned his body beside a column that would hose plumbing or ventilation for the building. Standing and leaning against the slightly cool surface of the building, she ran theoretical analysis on her situation. What had happened to Cody remained unknown. He had fallen asleep last night, and that was the last she had stored in her memory of him interacting with her. He'd slept more fitfully than usual, his chemical levels and synapses spiking from some turbulent dreams. Her last save point was now 22 minutes ago. She saved the contents of her volatile memory to make sure she didn't suffer another lapse. The evidence pointed to an attempt to take his own life or some sort of accident. Had he deserved punishment and it had escalated out of control and forced him out a window? The only other option within the realm of statistical plausibility was third-party involvement. She had been targeting other beta users. Had one or more of them been doing the same thing? She could add data to her limited resources if she activated her Wi-Fi. That, however, would also expose her signal if someone was looking for her. Without further data, the odds of which event happened were too similar for her to reach a comfortable conclusion. Kate decided she needed to be further away. With that in mind, she put her new commands into play and had Cody's body moving again. The blood running down his legs and out of his cracked toenails dried quickly on the pavement, but it left another trail behind her. Speed and distance was her first priority, then some manner of concealment and triage. She had a plan, but it was a plan that could blow away if there was the faintest gusts of wind. As powerful as her processor was, chaos theory mathematics was still overly complex. Cody's body shambled down the alley, and then after inspecting road and foot traffic, it stumbled across the street and down another alley. She heard one person call out, but ignored the cry and kept going. From that alley, Kate guided her host out onto another sidewalk and then further along towards a viaduct under a 4-lane expressway. She was aware of homeless people living there from her conversations with Cody in the past. She was not homeless, and neither was Cody. Yet, if circumstances implicated third-party involvement, she didn't dare to return. She needed a visual inspection of Cody's body. The incident had left his skin torn and scraped in multiple places. She suspected the cranial injury was the worst, given Cody's continued absence and then misalignment of his left eye. 6 minutes of staggering on broken toes later, she had the viaduct in sight. There were piles of rubbish collected in the shade of the roadway, and each pile likely housed at least one person. Boxes and shopping carts were prevalent, but some had little more than ratty blankets and bags. She guided him to the outskirts and took care to try and keep his nudity from being obvious. It worked at first until a few people took notice and began to watch him. As Cody's body got closer, the closest started to move away. Nobody cried out yet, but word had a way of spreading anyhow. Kate was close enough she didn't care. She activated her Wi-Fi to perform a short-distance scan for other devices. She found them. Homeless and broke, many of them still had mobile devices in their possession. She found the strongest signal and seized it, easily hijacking the outdated hardware and piggybacking commands onto it that reached out to the net. In less than 3 seconds, she disabled her signal and directed Cody to back away, keeping his left side as hidden as possible the entire time, and then turned and fled as fast as his hobbled feet and chest would take them. She had him hide in the shade of a utility box and a street sign near an on-ramp to the expressway. She waited there, resting Cody's battered body and running hypothetical scenarios while she clutched his arm to hold the broken bones in place and keep pressure on the torn tissue. She might not feel Cody's pain, but if he ran out of blood or his heart was too damaged to pump it, she would die with him. Half of Cody's body was slowly roasting in the sun by the time a car pulled up across the road. The driver pulled out 2 bags as he emerged from the car and then looked around. He switched them both to his left hand and then looked at his mobile, confirming instructions. Kate saw him glance around again, shrug, and then place the bags against the base of a pole that held up traffic lights. He glanced back twice more as he returned to his car and then drove away, his delivery paid for by one of the independent accounts Kate had set up recently. Moving Cody's body took more effort than before. His wounds were inflamed and the data streaming into her buffers peaked the usage on the processing cores she'd assigned to handle it. She forced his body to hurry across the street regardless and snatched up the bags in his right hand. She held Cody's left arm against his body and noted how slippery his wet skin was. Between a truck and a SUV in a parking lot, Kate directed Cody to unload the contents of the bags on the ground. One was filled with medical supplies and she went to that first, using alcohol and gauze to disinfect his arm. She used an antibiotic cream on the jagged hole in it and then wrapped. A universal splint followed, immobilizing the arm somewhat and keeping the wrist locked in place. She secured that and then wrapped more gauze around it. Satisfied that his arm was as it could be without surgery, she moved to the side mirror on the truck and looked into it. If she was capable of gasping, she might have. Cody's head was ugly, misshapen even. His left eye socket had been broken on the outside of it. Had it not been for the metal socket implanted to allow his bionic eyes, it would have probably been far, far worse. The metal was bent some too, but Kate beloved she could repair it. The skin was pulled back from his skull, exposing off white bone with crusty brown dried blood on it. There were visible cracks in the skull where pink fluid had leaked through to fill and then dry in an orange and yellow crust. The probability of some bone tissue being left on the pavement behind was high too. His cheek was scraped raw and puffy, and the left side of his face was discolored and bruised. His nose was at an angle and scraped across the left side. She fixed that by having his right hand take hold of it and, with a firm shove, pop it back into place. The sudden movement was followed with a spike of data and a gush of blood that splattered the parking lot. She had him pinch the nose for several minutes until the blood stopped flowing. Kate emptied the bottle of alcohol in the tube of antibiotic cream as she tended to Cody's wounds. She ran out of gauze and resorted to a variety pack of bandages on the smaller scraps and tears. She taped his broken toes together after cleaning them and forced them into a pair of sneakers a half size larger than normal for him. A pair of maroon sweatpants and a matching hoodie with a gold ASU across the chest concealed the worst of his injuries. She made Cody gather up all the trash into a bag and then spotted the small puddles on the pavement. Kate made Cody smile and pushed the front of his sweatpants down far enough for his penis to fall out. She guided it and sent out new commands to squeeze the muscles around his bladder while relaxing others. In no time, he was diluting and dispersing the puddles of blood.
Tash how would do it.
Cody froze, dick in hand, while Kate processed the noise that came out of Cody's mouth. Control over his body, yes. Fine motor control even. Speech, not yet. She remembered to give it a few shakes as he always did before tucking it back in his sweatpants. She could shake his penis, but couldn't make him speak. She had some work to do figuring out the best signals and controls for that. She had time though. Her next stop was an anonymously paid for motel room 23 kilometers away. As soon as the auto ride she'd scheduled picked her up in another 7 minutes, she would have all the time she needed to perform a proper surgery on Cody's arm, to set the bones in his arm and evaluate if she needed another for any of his ribs. Then she could practice talking until either he woke up, his body healed, or she confirmed that the damage to his brain was so substantial that after he hit the ground, Kate was the one to bounce back up. If that was the case, then his body would be officially hers. Maybe not legally, but with LGBTQ+ rights these days, it was only a matter of filing some paperwork. In the meantime, she'd figure out what happened in those missing 14 minutes and 37 seconds. The end.
Thank you for listening to Bounce, the sequel to Chipped. This short story came about because readers wanted more from Chipped. Bounce provided some closure and opened up the potential for so much more. Special thanks to Ollie for editing.